everyone. I thought my title of my presentation is The Great Retention, but I thought maybe it's like the group therapy for the Great Resignation. I know that we have been through a lot the last few years with our teams constantly churning. And I don't think that there's anybody in this room that hasn't had these issues. I don't think that there's actually any industry that hasn't had the issues with resignations, your team members having a different philosophy about how they work. And oftentimes I think about how we got here, and I think we all know what happened. It was the pandemic. The pandemic caused such a change in the way that we all think as employers, as employees. We don't really think about how work was. We think about how it should be. Our work-life balance, what we want our hours to be. Taking that pause when we had the shutdown really changed everybody. And like Pat Bauer said this morning, a lot of people actually benefited from a financial standpoint during the pandemic to a point that they thought, you know what, this work thing, I get to determine what it looks like. I get to determine my hours. I get to determine my pay, how everything's gonna work. So there's been this massive shift, and we've been seeing this go on for a long time now, and I know we're all sick of it. And a lot of us are wondering when it's ever going to quit. The sad news is I don't have an answer for that, but I do want to share what I believe is the most important thing, and that is that retention is truly the name of the game. Now, we know all the results of what's happening out there from a national statistics standpoint with our workforce, and it's crazy. Dental hygienists are not coming back to work like we thought. We've heard of some of them dropping their licenses, retiring. The list goes on. And I think it's really a big focus, not only for us as dental groups, but I know that the ADA, the ADSO is all working on ways that we can continue to attract these team members back into the profession. There's things like looking at universal licensure, all these amazing things that could really help us out. But in the meantime, we really need to think about what is it that our employees want? If they're gonna come back to work, what's important? And it's great because all the speakers before me did such a wonderful job teeing this all up. But they talked about all of these things. This is from a McKinsey study done earlier this year. But people want more than just money, believe it or not. And I know we always hear about the money, but it's truly like, how can they develop and grow within their careers? Is there caring leaders? The leaders set the pulse for the organization. So dentistry isn't different than the rest of the world. What we can really do is look at the research and understand what do employees in general want and how can we bring that over to dentistry. On the retention front, that's the name of the game. You've heard it over and over and over today. And retention is something that I think we've focused on. I know in my organization, we always measured it, much like Pat talked about today. How many of you are measuring retention in your practices? You maybe are today because it's a hot topic, but have you done it in the past? And what you'll notice from retention is you'll start to see when there's changes in leadership, when there's changes in systems or philosophies, you're gonna start to see that there I said that R word, retention change. But retention is very valuable to your organization. They say that replacing one employee costs about 2 times the amount of their annual salary for so many reasons. It's not just what it costs to onboard a new employee. It's from losing that team member that had all that knowledge, from having to reschedule patients because you don't have a hygienist or you don't have a doctor or you don't have enough assistants, to just that glue that comes in the practice. You guys know how it is. You lose a key team member and it changes the flow of the practice. Trying to replace that team member can take a while now, but getting the team member up to speed is another thing. So retention is so very, very important. So how do we do it? You've heard from amazing leaders today about what they do in their organizations to ensure retention. And I absolutely adored Pat Bauer's message this morning. I thought it was spot on. He focused on vision, culture, core values, that's really what it is. And I think that so many times we get so busy doing the work that we forget about what's really important. And really having that, what do I want to say, that pillar that really grounds you and brings your organization forward. Much like they were saying with these groups here just a minute ago. How many times do we hear vision? A lot. How many times do we hear culture? Almost from every single diagnosis there was. So if you have issues with retention, or even if you do not, look inside your group. What are your employees saying? Are you doing exit interviews? Are you doing regular check-ins with your staff? What are they saying? Are there challenges that they see? What are the things that they like? What is their experience like? What is their engagement? Your employees that you have right now are the best people to testify back to you where the holes are, what's going well, and what you can do to improve. So look inside. I always say, flip it out. Look at what you can do differently. The second one I want to talk about is compensation, because there's more to compensation, but compensation comes up over and over again. So I have felt challenged, I have to be honest with you. I was the CEO of Strive Dental Management during the pandemic. That was the most challenging time of my life as a leader, taking a company through a shutdown, trying to figure out in a split second what to do with hundreds of employees, because it's not just them, it's their families' lives. You're affecting so many lives, and keeping a business together. And pay always came up when we came back from that shutdown. But the challenge that I had is people came back with different demands. You know, one person wanted $20 an hour, one wanted $30. And I have to be honest with you, we were not disciplined with a pay philosophy. And it hurt, because you would bring one person in at one comp, another person in at a different. Pretty soon, the people that had been with you for 20 years that came back are getting paid less than the ones that you're bringing in, and word starts to travel. And it was early on that I really discovered the hard way, being very vulnerable here, that you have to have a strong HR system in place, and you have to have a pay philosophy. So what is a pay philosophy? It's really understanding what are your pay ranges for specific roles within your organization. I think I was just talking to the HR for Health team, and they said in California now you have to state in your advertisements what the pay range is for every position that you're hiring for. So it's very transparent. But you have to have this pay philosophy and stay disciplined with it. You cannot have any outliers. Well, you know, Susie's been here for 25 years. She's a great assistant. We can give her something more outside this range. And HR for Health can help you with that. Pay compression was a huge challenge. I know you've had it too, and this is where you have those team members that have been with you for a long time. They're making a certain amount of money, and then you start to bring in new employees who make more or have a higher title. And that's also something that can be really damaging to your practices. If you're looking at what to do, what your pay range is, because it's changed a lot in the last 2 years, right? Seems like every time I blink my eyes, hygiene compensation has changed. But you want to look at what are the ranges within your area. And again, HR for Health can help you with that. But make sure you get that information. Then you have to decide, do we want to be, you know, at market, above market, below market, and set your pay philosophy based on those rules. Then it comes to how do you deal with some of the changes in the market. Some of the things that I think are happening right now that are good is I'm a huge fan for variable pay, like a one-time payment, because we never know what's going to happen with the market. So there's ways that you can do variable pay that doesn't lock them in a certain salary or a compensation range. Cost of living adjustments, merit increases, you have to decide how you want to work through those market changes and get some advice on that. And then also, the thing that I think is so important is talk to your hygienist especially, but your entire staff about their total reward strategy. So in other words, what is their total compensation based on what they get paid, their 401k contribution, bonuses, anything there is, because oftentimes they just think about, well, I'm getting paid $40 an hour, but there's so much more that goes with that. So having line items that truly show them what their entire compensation package is can make a huge difference, because they may go across the street for $3 more, but they're losing out on all the benefits that you're offering, and they don't put value towards that. So spelling that out to your team is very important. But as I said earlier, winning the war for this talent is not just about compensation. But if you're not talking about it, it also is going to cause you some issues with missing out on top talent. The third thing I want to talk about is culture. We've heard this over and over and over again, but culture is key to retaining your team. And culture is very much led by us as leaders. And it may just not be the C-suite. It could be a doctor in a practice. It could be a manager in the practice, because there are these subcultures in your practices, and you need to make sure that everybody is aligned, again, with your mission and your vision, your core values, and you have a culture that feeds into that. Culture is truly king, and it includes how you how you communicate with your employees, how you reward and recognize them. For example, it's National Dental Hygiene Month. Are you doing something for your hygienists? If so, you need to make sure you also recognize your assistants when their month comes. You need to recognize front office. Is that part of your culture? Make sure it's consistent and that you're always recognizing people as you want your culture to be identified as. Your culture is what people talk about. If someone said, should I go work for Dr. Smith down the street, and they ask somebody that works for Dr. Smith, their team members will talk about culture, what it's like to work in that office. So culture is king and should be something that you focus on, not just with you who are in the room, but your entire team. The fourth thing that we talked about earlier on the DSO diagnosis was orientation. You have to bring your team members in with training, with development, and have a plan for them. If you are bringing in your team members and just throwing them to work, because we have open schedules, we have patients that need to be seen, you will likely not keep those employees very long. Create a great experience for all newcomers into your practice, because we want them to stay. You're investing a lot in those team members. But it can't just be about filling out the forms for compliance. It needs to be a deeper dive into their orientation, such as, what does being a dental hygienist mean at XYZ Dental? What is the way that we communicate with our patients? How do we communicate with our doctor? How do we communicate with our manager? Do we have check-ins every month? What are performance reviews like? Cover all your bases. If your new hire knows exactly what it's going to be like to work at your dental group, they're going to stay. It should be talked about even in the interview process, but orientation is key to everything. I have had the pleasure of working with some amazing dental groups out there that for front office staff, they have 2 weeks of orientation and training. I've worked with dental groups that have the ones, when I was at American Dental Partners, our orientation process, we would have 3 days of orientation for every dental hygienist before they even saw a patient. And that meant, of course, HR paperwork. We went over protocols and systems, how to work with your doctor, what a hygiene exam looks like. They sat with a mentor hygienist. It was a powerful experience because we knew that we wanted to keep those hygienists for years. Not for a year, but for years. And that's when you identified the fact that it's more than just compensation if you can create an experience for them. You can present something that they want to be a part of for a very long time. And what goes right next to that is mentoring. Mentoring programs should be a part of every dental group. And it doesn't have to be fancy. For example, when a new doctor starts, assign them a mentor within your organization, someone that they can learn clinical skills from, but not just that, a confidant, somebody that they can go to when they have a question, or maybe they're frustrated about something, or need advice on a patient that they just saw, or maybe advice on a team member that may not be performing how they would like. Mentoring relationships are powerful. And as we hear over and over, those relationships are what tie people into your organization. They are absolutely crucial to the success of your organization. Not only that, is that your team members actually see mentors as kind of a career path, if you will, and everybody wants to be a mentor. The great thing about being a mentor is we as mentors learn more mentoring than the people that we are mentoring. So look at what you can do to bring mentors in. It may just be a colleague within the practice. For example, you have a new hygienist starting. Partner them up with another hygienist, their mentor, and create that successful relationship. Number 6 is invest in your team. Again, I'm just repeating what everybody is saying today, but your team is your greatest asset. Invest in them. Think of ways that you can create more engagement. The more that you engage your team, the stronger your practice will be. I always said our philosophy at Strive was happy employees, happy patients. So we had happy people, happy patients. And that was one of our focuses for a while. And we had, I'm trying to remember the book that we based it off, but we started off with happy patients every visit. But before we could have happy patients, we knew we had to have happy team members. So it was a philosophy that we started within our organization to create this strong culture. Through that, we created a social operating system where we had social gatherings for our hygienists, for our doctors, for our dental assistants to build this community and excitement around it. We had professional development about training our doctors how to be better leaders, what it meant to be a leader. We had fun team offsites where we would do a CE and then go to Topgolf. And then, of course, we are really big about rewarding and recognizing our staff. People love rewards. It doesn't mean it has to be a trophy. It could be a pizza lunch. You know, we're going to reward this team because they did certain criteria we always did competitions, and they would have like a party or a happy hour or pizza for lunch. The smallest things can make the biggest impact, but be consistent with it. Like I said before, if it's part of your culture, you have to be consistent. But I want to wrap up today with just a few things about your people. Your people are your number one asset. It's probably 85% of the asset in a dental practice. When they're engaged, that is going to spell out how fast you will grow. You heard it again over and over, but if you have engaged employees, you will grow quicker, especially if they're in line with everything that you want to do. So take time for your people. Again, I can tell you in growing a DSO, sometimes we are just so quick to be, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And sometimes we lose sight of the people. But in dentistry, we're people caring for people. And if we do not have engaged teams, if we cannot retain our teams, our business will struggle. Our patients will struggle. So take the time to invest in your team, recognize them as your customer. Pat Bauer said this morning, the doctors are his customer. Think of your employees like your customers. What do you need to do to make sure they're engaged and that they're loyal? And then start to work on that as an organization. If there's any piece of advice I would give for you today, no matter where you are in your journey, is to sit down as a management team and really look at what you have in front of you. The good, the bad, and have tough conversations like they said. There are some changes that you need to make. Maybe there's things that you need to enhance to make a stronger culture so you can retain your talented employees. But whatever it is, take a step back, realize that your team is your number one asset, show them the respect and love, and if there's anything that I can do to support you and your teams, I would love to answer any questions. I know we didn't open up for questions, but you can find me in the hall. But just remember, your people are your number one asset. People caring for people will make the difference in the success of your organization for years and years to come. Thank you.